Hello there and welcome to ARIRANG News, live from Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The stories making headlines at this hour. Today is the last day of this year's regular session at the National Assembly. About 100 bills, including some focused on boosting welfare, are expected to pass. Sony is hacked again. It's the second time in less than a week. This time it's the Sony PlayStation network. A hacker group called Lizard Squad claims responsibility. And the effect from the execution of Jang Song-thaek, once North Korea's second most powerful man and a strong supporter of China, is still being felt on Sino-North Korean ties. More on this coming up shortly. But first, lawmakers are going to wrap up this year's regular session at the National Assembly today. They have about 100 bills piled up waiting to be passed. They include one on improving welfare and another one that will prevent retired government officials from receiving privileges. For this report, we have ARIRANG's Kim Young-gil.
Starting next year, Korea's two political parties have agreed to give families facing severe financial hardships more help from the government. The National Assembly will pass 3 revised welfare bills today that will expand the scope of beneficiaries and put up a stronger safety net for destitute families. The bills were proposed after a mother and her 2 daughters committed suicide in February in Seoul because of financial troubles. On top of the welfare bills, rival parties also agreed to pass an anti-corruption bill to restrict public officials from getting new jobs for up to 3 years after they retire. It's intended to stem the long-standing practice of government officials taking jobs related to their area of purview after retirement, something that often leads to corporate malfeasance and negligence. Violating the law carries a possible punishment of 2 years in prison and fines of $18,000. However, the parliament has been dragging its feet on an anti-corruption bill that would set up stricter punishments for bribery among civil servants. The anti-bribery bill is still up for review in committee, as lawmakers have not been able to reach an agreement on whether families of civil servants should also be subjected to possible punishment. Lawmakers are also turning the mirror on themselves. The ruling party's Reform Committee has proposed reducing certain privileges for lawmakers, which includes banning legislators from holding public signing events for books they've authored, as they can be used to raise illegal campaign funds or take bribes. Lawmakers would also not get paid if a parliamentary session does not open on time or if they are absent from a session in progress. But they failed to reach agreement on whether lawmakers should lose their immunity from arrest while on duty, since the Constitution guarantees such rights. Kim Young-gil, ARIRANG News.
The ASEAN Korea Commemorative Summit is slated to kick off in Korea's second biggest city of Busan on Thursday, and the first leader attending the meeting has arrived. Sultan Haji Hassan al-Bolkiah of Brunei landed at an Air Force base south of Seoul on Monday. The Sultan, who is also on a state visit, is scheduled to hold summit talks with President Park Geun-hye later on this Tuesday. The office of Philippine President Benigno Aquino, meanwhile, says the president has canceled his Korea trip to deal with the aftermath of Typhoon Hagapit, which has killed at least 27 people in the island nation. His cabinet and finance secretaries will represent him at this week's ASEAN-Korea summit. Now, starting today, Korea and China together began patrolling Korean waters to spot Chinese fishermen illegally fishing in the area. The patrols will take place for a week, but whether this will be effective in solving the chronic headache for Korean fishermen remains to be seen. Connie Kim has more on this development.
Illegal fishing in Korean waters has long been a thorn in the side of Korean fishermen, and Korea and China are now working together to do something about it. Over the next week, 2 patrol boats, one from Korea and one from China, will travel throughout the overlapping areas of the 2 countries' exclusive economic zones in the West Sea. They'll be stopping boats from their respective countries that are found to be fishing illegally. Once the patrol period ends on December 15th, Korea and China will exchange the information they've collected and discuss possible measures. Now, this comes after President Park Geun-hye and Chinese leader Xi Jinping agreed during summit talks in June to conduct a joint patrol of the area by the end of this year. It's expected that there will be 2 to 3 more inspections of the same kind next year. Korea's Oceans Ministry says that patrols are necessary and that measures currently in place are not effective in ending illegal practices by Chinese fishermen. Last month, the government announced plans to set up a special task force consisting of naval vessels and helicopters. They're also reviewing plans to confiscate unregistered Chinese ships. Over the past 5 years, more than 1,800 Chinese boats have been seized for illegal activities within Korea's exclusive economic zone. And it's estimated that about $1.2 billion is lost from illegal fishing every year. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
It's been a year since North Korea's Jang Song-thaek, who was seen as one of the most important links between China and North Korea, was executed. Experts say the chill is still being felt between the two countries, but could Pyongyang have found a new friend? Lee Ji-yoon has more.
It wasn't welcome news for China last year when it heard North Korea's young leader Kim Jong-un had purged his uncle, Jang Song-thaek. Jang was well known for supporting closer ties with China, especially for Beijing-backed economic reforms. A year has passed, but China and North Korea relations are still feeling the strain from Jang's execution. The number of political exchanges between the two countries has fallen sharply. In fact, in July, the Chinese president visited South Korea first, skipping the traditional stopover in Pyongyang. As for their economic ties, the two countries were looking to develop North Korea's Nasan and Hwakeunpyeong special economic zones. However, these projects hit a major speed bump after Jang's death. China's trade with North Korea also dropped by about 3% in the second quarter of 2014 to $1.3 billion, although it still accounts for most of North Korea's foreign trade. As for North Korea's nuclear test threats, Beijing was unusually bold in its criticism and agreed to the tightening of UN Security Council sanctions on the regime. While North Korea may be losing China, it's actually making friends with Russia.
Despite criticism toward its nuclear program and human rights violations, North Korea is still managing to continue its diplomatic efforts with Russia.
Just last month, North Korea's top official, Choi Dong-hae, was in Moscow to discuss trade and projects. Despite all the chills, though, experts say there's still a chance that China and North Korea might make up in the near future and be back on the same page once again. Lee Ji-yoon, ARIRANG News.
And staying with North Korea, international aid to Pyongyang amounted to a mere $30 million last year, just 1/10 of what it was 10 years ago. A report released by the Korea Development Institute today notes a drop in aid by key donor countries such as South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. When it received the most aid was back in 2002 at around $360 million, and it received the lowest, $24 million, in 2010 after its second nuclear test the year before. The report says international aid to the North is declining not only in volume but also in the number of donor countries. As for the reason, the report blamed North Korea's lack of transparency about its food distribution system and the nutritional status of its people. Back here in South Korea, the International Olympic Committee gave the final okay to a reform plan that will allow future Olympic Games to hold events outside the host country or city. Now, that change could start with the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. But officials in Korea's eastern city of Pyeongchang are not bullish about that possibility. Shin Se-min has more.
Thank you. Also, this is unanimously approved.
In one of the most significant shakeups in its history, the International Olympic Committee has approved a measure to allow some events to be held in other cities or even other countries to spread out the financial burden of hosting the world's premier sporting event. The IOC hopes to move part of its package of reforms known as Olympic Agenda 2020 will encourage more countries to make bids or joint bids to hold either the Winter or Summer Games. Meeting in Monaco on Monday local time, IOC members also agreed to limit the games to 10,500 athletes in 310 events. The IOC will also scrap its cap of 28 sports in the games. This means popular sports like baseball, karate, and squash could make a comeback in time for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. The IOC decision could have major implications for 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Games, as the organization has suggested the organizers move the sledding sports to another country as a cost-cutting measure. The Pyeongchang Organizing Committee, however, says it has no intention of switching anything, as construction of stadiums and facilities has already begun. One option that's been suggested is splitting the event with Nagano, the host city of the 1998 Winter Games. Pyeongchang organizers say splitting the Olympics with Japan is very unlikely, given the frosty relations between the two nations over historical and territorial issues. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Global shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. The United States is on alert against the possible backlash from the release of a Senate report on the interrogation techniques used by the CIA. White House spokesman Josh Earnest said Monday that the administration had taken prudent steps to ensure security at possible targets even outside the U.S., while also expressing support for the release of the report.
On his first or second day, the administration strongly supports the release of this declassified summary of the report. The president believes that on principle, it's important to release that report so that people around the world and people here at home understand exactly what transpired.
Now, the document, a nearly 500-page summary of the Senate report, is said to contain details of the CIA's treatment of detainees and methods used to extract information in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. Publication of the report has been delayed amid disagreements in Washington over what should be made public. Sony has been hacked again. This time it wasn't their studio in Hollywood, but the online PlayStation network. Hackers that call themselves the Lizard Squad have claimed responsibility. Connie Lee has this report.
It's another hack attack on Sony. The company's online PlayStation store is up and running now, but it was down for a few hours on Monday with this message greeting visitors. It's not you, it's the internet's fault. Hacker group Lizard Squad has claimed responsibility for the attack, posting its achievement on its Twitter feed using the PlayStation Network acronym. This latest attack comes shortly after hackers paralyzed the computer systems of Sony Pictures. The Hollywood production company suffered a massive data breach, with its servers shut down and tons of confidential information leaked, including a handful of unreleased movies and the social security numbers of employees. Many reports claimed North Korea was behind the cyber attack as retaliation for this.
You want to go kill Kim Jong-un?
Totally. I'd love to.
An upcoming Sony Pictures movie about the communist state. North Korea has denied responsibility, but it did praise the hack as a righteous deed. Meanwhile, Lizard Squad, the hacking group that took down PlayStation's site, has warned that more attacks are coming sometime this month. The FBI has warned other companies to be on high alert as they too could be targeted. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
The ride-sharing mobile application Uber has now been banned from India's capital of New Delhi after one of its drivers was arrested on charges of rape. This is a huge setback for Uber as it was eyeing India, the firm's largest market outside the U.S., in its plan to expand globally. The accused driver appeared in court on Monday, and protests against the private car service are reportedly growing in Delhi. This development comes after a 26-year-old female passenger was sexually assaulted late Friday night. Local police say the 32-year-old driver had been acquitted 3 years ago after being arrested for another rape allegation. New Delhi's transport commissioner said he was blacklisting Uber for licensing the driver without a background check. Uber's CEO, in an online post, promised to, quote, do everything to help bring this perpetrator to justice and to support the victim in her recovery. Judge Jang Sang-ho has been elected to serve as a judge at the International Criminal Court. The 48-year-old South Korean was voted on Monday local time at the UN headquarters in New York and will serve as one of the ICC's 18 judges for a 9-year term. He was elected with 2/3 of the vote over 16 other candidates. The intergovernmental organization conducts elections every 3 years to appoint 6 judges. Mr. Chung has been serving as a UN judge at the extraordinary chambers of the courts of Cambodia since 2011. Now, it's only been a couple of weeks since global oil prices tumbled to a 4-year low, but it has taken another step down. Prices went down to levels not seen since 2009 on Monday, and experts predict it will go even further down next year. Kim In-ji has the details.
Global oil prices tumbled to a 5-year low Monday following projections of a steeper downward trend next year. West Texas Intermediate fell 4.2% to finish at just over $63 per barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange. That's the lowest it's been since July 2009. The benchmark Brent crude also fell more than 4% to $66.19 a barrel, its lowest level since September 2009. This comes after the chief executive of Kuwait's national oil company said Brent oil prices are expected to hover around $65 per barrel for the next 6 to 7 months. Morgan Stanley also expects prices to slump for some time. Last week, it cut its average 2015 Brent base case outlook by about 30% to $70 a barrel, adding that prices could plummet to as low as $43 a barrel at some point. Citing global bank UBS AG, the Wall Street Journal reports that every $10 drop in oil prices will add around 0.2 percentage points to global GDP. And those expected to benefit the most are countries that rely heavily on oil imports, such as Korea, India, Germany, and China. Kim In-ji, ARIRANG News.
Now, we've been reporting about the weakening Japanese yen for months now, yet here we are again talking about it again. Analysts forecast this trend will continue next year, and it's not welcome news for Korean exporters at all. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The Japanese yen is weakening twice as fast as the Korean won, raising concerns Korean exporters will continue losing their price competitiveness in global trade. Since the start of the year, the yen has tumbled 13% against the greenback, while the Korean won dropped 6%. It's believed the different pace of recovery in Japan, Korea, and the United States is being reflected in the exchange rate. Japan recorded negative growth for 2 consecutive quarters, leading up to the period ending in September. In contrast, the U.S. posted its strongest growth in more than a decade in the July to September period. The recovery of the Korean economy has been lackluster, but with the country reporting a balance of payments surplus for the 32nd consecutive month in October, the Korean won's fall against the greenback has been limited. The current exchange rate trend is forecast to continue throughout next year as well. Overseas investment banks tracked by Bloomberg forecast the Japanese currency to weaken more than 2% next year, when the Korean won is expected to weaken a mere 1% against the U.S. dollar. Some economists expect Korean exports to drop next year if the won continues to strengthen against the Japanese yen. A report by the Hyundai Research Institute last month said Korean exports will drop by 9% if the Korean currency trades at an average of 9 won against the yen. The won is hovering around 9.2 to the yen, the highest level in 6 years and 9 months. Kim Chang-bae, a senior researcher at the Korea Economic Research Institute, says it's imperative the Bank of Korea cuts the key interest rate to keep the local currency from appreciating more against the yen. Kim Jung, ARIRANG News.
Hanji is traditional Korean handmade paper, and with a history of over 1,500 years, it's a big part of Korea's cultural history for sure. Our Im Yoon-hee has an exhibition featuring the works of one artist who makes art out of this tradition. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So Hanji actually was considered one of the finest forms of paper in Asia, and thus led to the establishment of quite a few art forms. Now today I have the exhibition of one artist who has mastered one such form called jisung. Take a look.
Each strand hand-twisted, then woven together with hundreds of other strands. Artist Lee Young-soon is a master of jisung, the art of traditional Korean paper weaving. It's an art that isn't found very often nowadays, but like the generations of artists before her, he is determined to preserve and pass on the tradition.
I must strive for well-being so that I can maintain the art and conserve it for future generations. That is my hope.
The Seoul Museum of Art is currently hosting a solo exhibition of Lee's works, featuring rows and rows of beautiful masterpieces, artfully handmade, down to every last detail. And aside from the more traditional woven forms of baskets and jars, Lee has also embraced the contemporary, creating unique jisung works. While jisung served a practical role years ago, today it's a highly prized skill, with only a handful of true masters left in the field. Whether it be a jar and a lid or a small duck figure, Lee's works will be recognized for years to come, with the magnificence and detailed work she has committed to producing.
So tell us a little bit more about the artist. Is she well known in this particular field?
So there aren't too many artists who are capable of her quality of work, and so she's actually over 70 years old, and she's still producing works. And
Oh,
so
she didn't look 70 at all.
Right. She looks good for her age, so it just shows how passionate she is about her work. But she's actually produced over 3,000 pieces, so she really does want to contribute to the following generations, especially with this jisung art form.
And I should know all these, as a Korean, we should know the names of what this art form is, but jisung, it is the first time that I'm hearing that they actually have a name for that particular pieces.
Right, and it is really, they have some really beautiful works there, but you know, a little bit more about the whole Hanji and jisung, this type of work. So during the Japanese invasion, many of these art forms were really damaged because at that time they introduced the mass paper press, and so jisung and Hanji, the form of making Korean traditional paper, was really put on the back burner and kind of set on the decline. And so as a result, the art form really did kind of take a hit. But you could really see that Hanji is very unique. It has this very multi-directional grain that it's known for, and really was prized and still is very much prized. So artists like Lee Young-soon is very, very prized. You know, very valuable to the future of Korea's culture.
And I mean, it does carry the value of art, but it also it looks to be practical too. I mean, you can use it as a basket as well, and as a decoration for the little ducklings that we saw in the report. All right, thank you very much, Yoon-hee, for today's report, as always.
You're welcome.
Well, a dry weather watch remains in effect in the east, and a dry weather advisory has been issued for Seoul as well. So be sure to be extra cautious when handling fire and drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. And it's looking fairly bright outside across much of the country, and the sun is boosting our chilly morning lows, which will transition to mild afternoon highs, getting up to temperatures similar to yesterday. So the daily high in Seoul will peak at 3 this afternoon, while Daegu and Gwangju will rise to 8 and 7, and Busan will be topping out at 10 under lots of sunshine. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island will be getting up to 10, while Daejeon and Dokdo sees highs of 5 later in the day. Now tomorrow should be the mildest of the months, with a high peaking at 5 here in the capital. But tomorrow night, mix of rain and snow will bring down the temperatures to a very cold size. And they should remain freezing through the end of the week. So please keep that in mind. That's all for me today, and let's send it back to Hyun-kyung in the studio.
Thank you, Jihyun, for the update. That's ARIRANG News for now. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more updates at 4 p.m. Korea time.